And you're watching NewsX World. We begin with the top stories of today. Well, Pope Leo XIV is all set to hold his first private audience with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. This comes after his grand inaugural mass earlier today at the Vatican, which saw world leaders, royals and tens of thousands of spectators at the St. Peter's Square. Russia has reportedly launched the largest drone attack of the war, targeting Ukraine after the first direct peace talks for over 3 years. Ukraine says it has downed 88 of the 273 drones. As President Trump says, he will hold talks with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky on Monday. Israeli attacks have reportedly killed 135 Palestinians today, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Meanwhile, Hamas has proposed releasing 9 hostages for a 60-day truce as ceasefire talks continued in Qatar amid an intensifying Israeli offensive. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it has successfully intercepted a ballistic missile fired from the Yemen Houthis. Air raid sirens were heard across parts of Israel, leading to the suspension of flights from Israel's main airport. Pakistan has announced it will send a delegation abroad to present its case for peace following the Pahalgam terror attack. It comes after India announced they would send a multi-party delegation to brief global leaders on its operation and stance against cross-border terrorism. A bomb has exploded near a California fertility clinic, killing one person. The FBI calls the deadly explosion terrorism, while police say the deadly blast was an apparent intentional act. A Mexican Navy training ship has crashed into the Brooklyn Bridge in New York, leaving 2 people dead and multiple injured. Parts of the mast fell on the deck, and the Mexican Navy has confirmed the damage and say they are investigating the crash. South Korean presidential candidates are set to face off in the first televised debate ahead of an election on the 3rd of June. The vote will take place after former President Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached over a short-lived martial law declaration. Alright, starting with the top story, Ukraine says Russia launched a record number of drones overnight in a barrage that targeted multiple regions, including the capital Kyiv, where one woman was killed. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that 273 Shahid and other drones were fired, the highest single-day number since the war began. Of those, 88 were destroyed and over 120 reportedly veered off course. Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Sirdenko called it a record attack and accused Russia of deliberately targeting civilians. The assault comes just 2 days after the first direct peace talks in over 3 years held in Turkey. Despite the dialogue, Russia is intensifying its offensive and claimed on Sunday it had seized another village in Donetsk. President Putin, in an interview aired Sunday, insisted Russia's aim is to eliminate the root causes of the war and secure its borders. The rhetoric Ukraine and the West reject as justification for a brutal invasion. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, attending the Vatican inauguration of Pope Leo XIV, shook hands with US Vice President J.D. Vance in a rare public encounter following recent diplomatic tensions. He is expected to meet with the Pope later Sunday. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump is preparing for phone calls Monday with both Putin and Zelensky, saying his goal is to end what he calls a senseless bloodbath. Despite ongoing diplomacy, violence on the ground continues to escalate, leaving little immediate hope for peace. Joining us on the program is Martin Erez, international affairs expert. Martin, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Well, Donald Trump is going to be speaking to Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, but the fact of the matter is, what is he expecting to change? He's had these conversations in the past as well. He came to the party. His election plank was that I will end this war. He has not been successful, and is tiptoeing with a number of issues, including tariffs, has also sent the wrong message to perhaps Vladimir Putin and Zelensky that Donald Trump cannot be taken seriously.
So absolutely, I think the problem with Donald Trump is that he wanted to absolutely dismiss the effort by the Biden administration. He wanted to do a complete change of strategy. He thought that approaching Putin was going to make the talks a little bit more effective. But right now, he's in a situation that both parties, no one knows what he really wants. Like from one side, Putin has declared that he doesn't trust the U.S. anymore. And right now, after what happened in the White House, Zelensky is also very disappointed. And it feels that the approach from Donald Trump in this issue has been taking not has been changing the policy of the U.S. Right now, it's not taking for granted this support. Right now, Trump is trying to reverse this sentiment, this international sentiment towards the U.S. and its support towards Ukraine, but it seems de escalation is unlikely.
Martin, you said de-escalation is unlikely, but the fact of the matter is that Ukraine is, not getting too much support from the Western countries at this point in time, and perhaps will lack the wherewithal in the next few weeks or months to come to take on Russia. With Russia intensifying this conflict, where do you see this going in the next few months? Is it about to get more dangerous, for this part of the world?
I think the war is not likely to go with a ceasefire or is not likely to end. I think Putin is defending the invasion and is claiming to eliminate the root of the causes. And all of this narrative is rejected by the West, while Zelensky has been seeing Vance at the Vatican event, and he wanted to approach Trump in order to change his mind. But I think Zelensky is not going to give up, but he's going to be protecting Ukraine, and Ukraine is going to be protecting itself, even if they feel they don't have the international support. And Russia is not going to give up. Russia is not interested in giving up territory or its goals. So both countries are not in a position that they're going to give something for peace. So I think this unlikely to be de-escalation in the next months.
Martin, you're absolutely right. And what do you think, the West is supposed to do at this point in time? Donald Trump and his efforts have more or less failed. Do you think that there needs to be more coalition of efforts within European and other countries, including India, to somehow get this conflict under control? Because if 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers are dying on a weekly basis, including civilians, that's a great loss.
Of course, I think right now, because of the new administration in Germany, Germany is taking seriously the threat from Russia, and they are approaching other European countries in order to make their armies stronger. So I think European response and support towards Ukraine will increase, will get more efficient, will get more straightforward, and they will try to make their militaries more stronger than before, and to support. They already said, like the Minister of Germany, he already said, Merz, that he's very interested in supporting Ukraine, and I think Europe is going to get stronger. I think Trump already knows that his strategy is failing, and it's very likely he will try to fix that approach. So I think in the future Ukraine will get more support, but it will take a lot of time for this war to get to a point of peace and a ceasefire.
Martin, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. Moving on, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has confirmed that negotiations with Hamas are currently underway in Doha. The talks, mediated by Qatar and the United States, include discussions on a possible truce, a hostage exchange, and terms for ending the war in Gaza. Netanyahu's office stated that any agreement to end the conflict must include the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip and the exile of Hamas leadership, according to reports. The current proposal involves the release of approximately 10 hostages in exchange for a ceasefire lasting up to 2 months, and the release of some Palestinian prisoners. Hamas has proposed the release of 9 hostages in exchange for a 60-day ceasefire, the release of Palestinian detainees, and the daily entry of 400 humanitarian aid trucks into Gaza. At least 135 Palestinians have been killed in the past 24 hours, with strikes targeting refugee camps across the Strip. Meanwhile, Israel launched a new offensive named Operation Gideon's Chariots to pressure Hamas into releasing the remaining Israeli hostages. Iran has condemned the escalation, accusing Israel of committing war crimes and calling for international accountability. Officials now put the death toll in Gaza at 53,000 since October. Negotiations in Doha continue, but a final resolution remains uncertain. Dr. Punsara Amar Singh, who's at the Kotawala Defense University, he's joining us all the way from Colombo. Appreciate you joining us. Well, 53,000 people since October 2023 is the count so far. Israel has its condition, but the fact of the matter is that 2 months is perhaps not enough to sustain peace in Gaza for the kind of numbers that we are seeing, which is the loss of life. It seems that more effort needs to be made by world leaders, perhaps even Donald Trump, whose focus is somewhere else today, on making sure that this conflict is resolved. What do you make of that, sir?
Yeah, I think as you clearly indicated that the 2 months has done nothing. And at the same time, we must understand both parties were quite adamant in their stances. And what is happening right now in the Middle East, the Hamas alacrity to come up with a ceasefire agreement which would last for 60 days should be understood in the context of Tel Aviv's decision to launch its mighty and the most exclusive military offensive in Gaza, which is known as the Gideon's Chariots. The Gideon's is a biblical figure, of course, and the Gideon's Chariot has made it thunder in Gaza Strip as the biggest grounding offensive since 7th of October. Because for the first time, right, since 2005, since Gaza captured the power in Gaza, the Hamas captured the power in the Gaza Strip, the Israeli army did not have opportunity to penetrate into the Al-Darabi territory, one of the most exclusive territories in Gaza Strip. And at this very moment, since Friday evening, IDF has made quite successful offensive towards this particular territory in Gaza by pushing Hamas to come to the ceasefire agreement. I mean, if you can clearly remember, before Friday, until Tel Aviv launched Operation Gideon's Chariot, Hamas was quite adamant. They stated that they would not go for a short-term ceasefire agreement. So what they asked was a full pound of flesh. They were asking for the complete closure of Israeli IDF military activities in Gaza back to the normality, right? Which was not quite possible. But now we can see at the end of Donald Trump's historic visit to Middle East, Israel came up with this sudden thundering military offensive, which has created debilitating effects on Hamas internally. So that is why, in my opinion, they have finally come to this truce for 60 days, 2 months, as you pointed out, which is highly unlikely to see a lasting peace within 60 days.
Absolutely right. And Dr. Punsara, do you also feel that Netanyahu is under a lot of pressure at this point in time to reach some sort of a deal with Hamas, and that is why he's pressing for demilitarization, but knowing the Iranians and some of the other countries that support Hamas, that may be a big challenge?
I would like to quote Israeli strategist Edward Luttwak, who has been advocating for the IDF's military innovations for past few decades. His writings extensively deal with how Israelis have been dealing with all this asymmetrical warfare after the 7th of October, the massacre of the kibbutz and South Israel. Edward Luttwak clearly pointed out that if IDF wants to get a quick military victory, a crushing military victory over Hamas, they need to get back to traditional, classical military doctrine of being offensive in the ground force rather than being specifically technological, right? Because you can see Israel has been spending millions of dollars for the Iron Dome. They have been spending millions of dollars for all these technological equipments, but they still could not penetrate into the tiny strip called Gaza, right? So Israel's economy is shrinking at this very moment as they have invested massively over these the military efforts. At the same time, there is no missile. 57 hostages are still being held, and only 23 people are being supposed to be alive as hostages, according to the Israeli intelligence sources. There is a tremendous pressure, as you clearly mention within Israel towards Benjamin Netanyahu. And at the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu had an egg on his face as Donald Trump deliberately decided not to make a visit to Israel during his historic visit to the Middle East, which was another embarrassing factor.
Dr. Pansara, I also want to pick your brains on another important aspect that has just turned out, that Donald Trump has, accepted Syria and its current president, who's a former rebel and an insurgent, as somebody who can be accommodated into the world order. He believes in forgiving Syria and giving them a second chance. Do you think that this has also generated a lot of fillip and motivation in the Arab world, and that perhaps might work against Israel?
I think so, because as we all know, Trump is quite unpredictable by nature. He says something today and he would do completely opposite thing by tomorrow. So that has been the fickle and volatile political realism of Donald Trump. But the Trump's indication towards Israel, towards the Assad's fallen regime of Damascus, the new regime of Syria, seems to be quite a promising deal for the Middle East. At the same time, as you mentioned, it contains certain repercussions for Israel, because Israelis always considered Americans as their biggest allies. To be very honest, people in Israel do believe Washington. People in Israel do believe Americans as their allies than Americans believe in the president and the administration in Washington, which has been the biggest reality of Israel since its inception. But the current geopolitical trajectory, in particular, Donald Trump's visit to Middle East and his motivation to forge ties with Gulf countries seems to be a bit of a blow on Israelis' foreign affairs architecture, in my point of view.
Sir, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Moving on, a deadly bomb blast rocked downtown Palm Springs outside a fertility clinic, killing one person and injuring 4 others. The FBI has declared it an act of terrorism. The explosion tore through the American Reproductive Center's clinic, damaging surrounding buildings and sending debris hundreds of yards away. FBI official Akil Davis said that it's one of the largest bombing investigations in Southern California. Listen in to the head of the FBI's Los Angeles field officer, Akil Davis.
This was an intentional act of terrorism. As our investigation will unfold, we will determine if it's an international terrorism or domestic terrorism. Let me be clear. This was probably one of the largest bombing investigations that we've had in Southern California. It's on scale of the Aliso Obeo bombing in Orange County.
Well, authorities believe the clinic was deliberately targeted. Witnesses reported seeing human remains near the scene, and a charred vehicle was found near the epicenter. While the identity of the deceased has not been publicly confirmed, local media suggests the person may have been the suspect. The clinic stated that all staff are safe and its lab, including eggs and embryos, is undamaged. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi claimed that the attack is unforgivable. The Center for Reproductive Rights condemned the attack, calling for stronger protections for such facilities. Investigations into the explosion remain ongoing at this point in time. Scott Faulkner, head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm based in Washington, is joining us at this point in time. Mr. Faulkner, always a pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you so much. What do you make of this blast? Obviously, it's unclear which organization is going to be held responsible for this kind of an attack. But the fact of the matter is that it's one of the largest bombings that have happened in California, Southern California, in the last few years.
It's very serious because you're dealing with when you move from just simply a disgruntled employee or some other personal issue to terrorism. That means that this is a targeted act, an intentional act to spread terror relating to a specific group of people, a specific action, or a specific issue. And the whole fertility movement was actually given a boost by President Trump back in late February when he wrote an executive order, issued an executive order promoting in vitro fertilization and other fertilization activities. So clearly something that they've already found, the FBI has already found, either in the social media of this individual. I mean, the person who died was the bomber himself. And so they've obviously begun looking into Did he act alone? How many people know how to build a car bomb of this magnitude? How many people have AK-47 sitting in the back seat of their car? So the key is that this is definitely a serious act by a serious person who may or may not have acted alone, but clearly something has already triggered the FBI and the Justice Department into realizing that this is a true act of terror intended to intimidate either a group of people or an activity.
Mr. Faulkner, let's also try and understand that America has not had any terrorism acts or events in the last few years. Do you think that what's happened in Asia and in between India and Pakistan and this renewed threat of terrorism is perhaps a reminder for the Americans as well that terrorism has not gone away?
Oh, totally. I mean, in fact, it's almost amazing that we haven't had more acts of terrorism in the United States. I mean, you've had an open border for 4 years. You've had 99 countries worth of people, most of them totally undocumented, totally unvetted, coming into our country. You have cartel activity. You have, good Lord, almost a full division of young Chinese men entering through California over the last 2 years. So it's really almost amazing that we haven't had more acts of this. And so is this the beginning of the beginning, so to speak, of having this activity happening that others will be inspired? So it's a dangerous time.
Mr. Faulkner, one last question before we let you go. What if this terrorism act or this attack is attributed to a country like Pakistan, which most of terror attacks in the recent history have been attributed to? Is America going to change its stance towards Pakistan?
It certainly would. I mean, we're back to the issue of what motivates someone to attack a fertility clinic. I mean, of all the positive goodness that one can provide in the medical profession, helping a couple have a child should be pretty much high on the list of a good universal good. So the question is, who would be so motivated as to want that to end and to intimidate people wanting to seek those kinds of services, and those kinds of people providing those services? I don't know if that really would tie to a international agenda or to a religious agenda. But again, this is very early on in the investigation, and time will tell.
Mr. Faulkner, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much. On that note, we are dipping into a short break, but keep watching NewsX World for news and updates from around the world.